Here's my proposed solution to solve the issue of Uber drivers and Lyft drivers not making enough money that I think would work out for everybody. And I'm going to give you a short answer and then a long answer and go into more detail. My proposed solution is have a fixed fee for every ride that is charged on the passengers. I'm going to go into a lot more detail because on this channel, I've done hundreds of videos. I don't think I'm at 1,000 yet, but I've done hundreds of videos on this channel. I've read hundreds, actually maybe even close to over 1,000 articles. I'm a former accountant, being big into business and the finances and everything. And after me looking at the meta-analysis of everything, I've done a lot of videos about the negativity regarding ride sharing, that Uber and Lyft drivers are just not happy with what's going on. You know, they're getting paid less, while Uber and Lyft is taking out a bigger cut. With things like inflation, things are more expensive for drivers. There's also too many drivers being on the road, and that problem might get worse. There's a lot of tricky things going on. I think the solution to this problem, honestly, if anyone from Uber Lyft ever watches this video, and I'm going to explain why, I think that there should be an extra fixed fee tacked on for passengers who take Ubers and Lyfts. I know your initial answer, like say if you order Ubers and Lyfts, it's like, Mark, no, I don't want an extra fee. I'm already paying enough. Hear me out. I actually think this would be a win for everybody. I do, for a few different reasons. Now, the main idea, I think, of this being a solution is a minimum hourly guarantee or minimum pay. I think this would help solve this issue. Now, to take a step back and then go back to now the in detail part of this video where I get a bit more technical about the finances, the wage law was passed in New York City, which basically means Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, basically ride sharing and delivery drivers now have to get a minimum hourly guarantee that can be dependent upon the normal hour or active hour. Whole other subject for a whole other video. I've already done dedicated videos about that. But basically, what the solution was is Uber Eats and DoorDash decided to tack on a $2 extra fixed fee for every order now. And what that does, and they probably have a bunch of accounting, a bunch of mathematics, and a bunch of analytics behind this to determine that $2, that allowed them to kind of compensate for the fact that now they have to pay their delivery drivers a minimum hourly guarantee. Same thing for ride sharing. And I think this could be done around the rest of the country. Now, of course, New York is very, very different than a lot of other places in the country. If you've never been to New York's, I feel like a very love or hate place. Like someone told me as a funny side note that I think like Los Angeles is a bad heaven and then New York's a fun hell or something like that, you know? But anyway, New York's a very unique place. So I know that that might not be exactly comparing apples to apples, so to speak, but that fixed fee tacked on to people ordering delivery allow them to compensate for the minimum hourly guarantee. And I don't see why this could not exist in other parts of the country for a few different reasons. Now, one, it's only $2. And I know, it reminds me of that episode of SpongeBob when he's like, $2? But I do think it's a small amount that is not a massive amount. Again, I don't know what the J&D is though. In case you know, J&D stands for just noticeable difference. It's a term used in psychology, statistics, and analytics where you determine what is the point at a given scenario when it comes to variables that past a certain point someone notices a difference. Like if you're in a hot room, or excuse me, let's say a normal room, let's say 65 degrees, and they turn up to 66, then 67, then 68. At what degree are you like, ooh, I'm kind of feeling a little toasty, it's a little hot, right? That's the J&D for temperature. When it comes to the mathematics and the accounting, I think $2 wouldn't really trigger that. Maybe at $4, I'm like, okay, wait, a $4 fee? Okay, that's getting a little ridiculous, right? But $2, I don't think is bad. The second reason why I don't think passengers would complain about this, and why I actually think it would work out kind of well, is I'm gonna call it the triple P, the post-pandemic pricing. As most people know, back in the day, Ubers and Lyfts were stupidly cheap. I mean, for those who live in LA know what I'm talking about in terms of the distance. I could go from Reseda to Hollywood, and granted, I'd be taking Uber Pool back in the day because I was super broke. It was just like $12. I mean, even so, if I got a regular one, it'd be like 18. That's probably, occasionally, maybe a 45-minute drive. I don't know how many miles. It's not, like, let me just say this, it's not a short ride. That same ride now would probably be closer to probably 40-ish bucks, so it's probably triple in price, right? Now, though, after the pandemic, people are kind of used to paying a little more for their Lyft and Ubers. I think we just kind of accept, like, look, That's the way it is. I would even say this bold statement that I think Ubers and Lyfts are recession proof in the sense that for a lot of people, they are a necessity. Whether you want to go out and drink and you don't want to drive, you want to be safe, you have to take Ubers and Lyfts. If like you don't have a car and you need to get to and from work, a lot of people rely on Ubers and Lyfts to go to their job or to go to different places. Like say if you're elderly or disabled or handicapped, Uber and Lyft allows you to get around, right? And so I look at Uber and Lyft being recession proof for people, whether they like it or not, kind of have to pay whatever the price is. And if you look at something like gas prices, it's very similar that when gas goes up, you're like, shoot, well, I have to buy gas. I need gas to get from point A to point B, right? So I think since the pandemic, people are used to paying more money. The third thing is the variability of Uber and Lyft prices. With delivery, it's a little more static. You kind of know every time you're paying. It's obviously going to be overpriced, but you have an idea of what it's going to cost. With Uber and Lyft, it is normal for you to pull it up. You're like, all right, I'm going to go from point A to point B, $15. The next time you check it, it's $17.50. You're like, a little more expensive. The next time you check it, it's $14. You're like, oh, okay, $1 cheaper than normal, right? People are used to this varying price. Fourth thing, and this is a big one, is the fact that it tells you ahead of time, right? Same thing with delivery driving. But I just want to say that as a side note that it does tell you ahead of time. It's not like afterwards to say, oh, by the way, we're giving you an extra fee, which leads me to point number 5, the non-price breakdown. I'm not going to try to act like, and I want to word this kind of the right way, that I don't mean this in like a deceptive way. But when you pull up the price breakdown for delivery driving, which is very different than rideshare driving, with delivery driving, when someone orders Uber Eats or DoorDash, it breaks down the price. It's like you're getting a $10 burrito, here's a service fee, here's tax, here's the extra fee, here's your driver. Like it breaks everything down for you, which might lead some people to be a little bit frustrated with that extra $2 fee in New York, for example. With Uber and Lyft, they don't show the price breakdown until afterwards. And in addition, off the GUI, or the graphical user interface of the app, what happens is they just see, do you want to rate the person, or what do you want to rate them? Do you want to add a tip? If you want to see the breakdown of why that price was the way it was, you can go into the nitty gritty, but 99% of people don't. They're just like, all right, cool, 5 stars. I think most people just hit 5 stars and they move on, they tip or they don't tip, right? Now, the reason why I think this proposed solution would actually work, and again, I want to stress, of course, I'm a former accountant, but I'm not your accountant or whoever's watching this video or Uber's and Lyft's accountant, of course. I think this would work because of those 5 reasons, like I said. I think that if you tacked on a $2 fee for every ride happening ever, extra, so every ride for the future, or for the next forever, I don't know, right, for the next 10 or 20 years, if we want to do some testing on this, every ride, there'd be an extra $2 fee, and that goes to then guaranteeing a minimum hourly guarantee for every Uber driver and Lyft driver in the entire country. If it works in New York, and I know New York and, like, say, Chicago or LA or San Diego or Miami or wherever, I know that's not comparing apples to apples. Maybe it's more apples to oranges. But I think there is an accounting solution that the extra money would come out of some passengers' pockets. And yes, would each Uber and Lyft, for example, let's say if that was across the board $2, would each Uber and Lyft be $2 more expensive? Yes. But with those 5 reasons, like I said, I genuinely don't know how much people would notice, and granted, yes, there will be some pushback. Maybe some people are like, $2, I'm not paying that. To me, of course, granted, I used to drive for Lyft and Uber, I'd have no problem paying $2 extra per ride forever, or for the rest of time, in order to make sure that every driver now gets a minimum hourly guarantee. I think having that minimum hourly guarantee gives and would give a lot of drivers a nice cushion and foundation, being like, wow, this hour sucks, there's too many drivers on the road, and blah, blah, blah. At least I made at least $16 an hour. Now, is that a mind-blowing amount? No. And again, I know this does not factor in things like expenses and taxes especially and whatnot, but at least it's better than nothing. I think that it could be possible for Uber and Lyft to kind of implement this in a federal level. Because again, on this channel, I've done a lot of videos about the pros and the cons of Lyft and Uber. And I hate to say it, all my videos recently have been negative, and I don't like to be negative. I don't hit record, or obviously I take notes sometimes where I film a video. I don't really like go into it being like, all right, how to create a really clickbait. I know some YouTubers do this, and some journalists do this, don't get me wrong, and a lot of news companies do this, where they go into it being like, all right, how to create a really clickbaity title or a good article title And there's been a lot of psychological studies to show that negative news gets more attention than positive news. I mentioned that a lot on this channel as well. I know a lot of people do that in the journal. It's kind of unfortunate that sometimes you are between two situations. What's the phrase we use? Like a rock and a hard place or whatever, where you're like, okay, I can write this super clickbaity title that isn't super accurate and it's a bit negative and it'll get a lot of hits. But I know a lot of journalists have said, well, I believe in the integrity of journalism, of fact-checking and research. However, if I make it the honest title and I give an honest perspective, it might not get that many clicks or views. And now a lot of companies are saying, screw it, we want to get those clicks and views because we make more money because of all this different stuff, right? But anyway, on this channel, of course, I don't go into it being like, I'm going to create a clickbaity title and create a video creating FUD or fear, uncertainty, and doubt just so I get more views and people watch the videos longer. No, I go into everything in a very honest, transparent way, looking at the way things look to me, and of course, looking at the way the ball lies. I say that a lot. I call the ball as it lies, in the sense that, sometimes Uber and Lyft, I think, is in the wrong. Sometimes I think they're in the right. Sometimes drivers, I think, are a lot in the right, and their frustrations are justified. Other times, I don't agree with drivers. And I say, you know what? I think they're maybe just complaining or making excuses, right? So I do genuinely like to look at both sides. I think it's very important. And I think the biggest thing, though, there's a very harsh fundamental truth, is one, Uber and Lyft's been not been treating their drivers the best. I think there has been some effort to make that better, I will say. If I've looked at both sides, with Uber, doing things like looking at wrongful deactivations. When it comes to Lyft, for example, looking at what David Reisher's doing, I think David Reisher's been doing an excellent job. It's not easy being in the position of owning Uber and Lyft and being such a public figure, because he really puts himself out there, of satisfying the drivers, the passengers, and the shareholders. He kind of has to balance a triple scale, so to speak. I think he's been doing a great job. Now, is it perfect? No, but can it be perfect? I don't think so. It is a difficult juggling act to have. And with all that being said, I think that although, yes, if you look at the negatives versus the positives, I think there might be a little bit of negativity from some passengers. But I'm going to be honest. With all the things I said, of the reasons why I think that it would work, one, I bet some passengers might not even notice. And two, I think some passengers might not even care. To some people, it'll be like, hey, it's only $2. In addition, I know $2, depending on your financial situation, can be a lot more. If you're going out and go to and from the bar, the nightclub, if you go to and from work, that's an extra $4 you have to spend a day. If you actually go to work 5 days a week, that's an extra $20 a week. And then you tack that on for a month, like say 4 weeks a month, that's an extra $80 a month you might have to spend in terms of Lyft and Uber fees to get to and from work. Now, yes, that is a lot of money, especially for a lot of people. That's an extra cell phone bill for a lot of people. That's an extra water bill or utility bill, or that's an extra bill, something I have to spend more. But I do think this would kind of solve the solution, because it would be a win for drivers. That $2 would allow drivers to have a minimum hourly guarantee that gives them a little more protection, and I think that would help out. Now, granted, I don't know how this would work out legally. Again, this is just my idea of a proposed solution. Of course, I don't work for Lyft and Uber. I've not seen Uber and Lyft's financial statements on the back end. I've not seen their analytics on the back end, and I think that kind of is a telltale, big sign of what's going on. And I don't know if this would then start moving into the whole aspect of, well, if you're guaranteeing a minimum hourly wage, is that moving the needle from independent contractor closer to employee? I don't know. And granted, maybe some passengers will be mad at this, being like, no, I'm not going to pay $2. Like, they chose to drive for Lyft and Uber, which is true, right? So again, there's a lot of different arguments to be had on both sides, but I think it'd be a win for the drivers to at least have some right for compensation. And then for Uber and Lyft, hey, maybe they might make, at the end of the day, more money. So drivers are making more money. Lyft and Uber is making more money, right? So maybe for Lyft and Uber might be better. But then, of course, again, it is the passengers who do suffer. And it all, of course, which is kind of interesting, it would then depend, of course, on the frequency of taking Ubers and Lyfts. For me, if I actually go out on, let's say, a Friday night and Saturday night, and I'm consuming alcohol, I'm looking at an extra $8 per weekend times 4 equals, whatchamacallit, 32, excuse me, just blanked out for a second. It'd be an extra $32 a month of me going out using Uber and Lyft 4 times every weekend, there and back being 2 times, right? So it'd be an extra $32 a month. That's equal to what? Maybe a few beers at the bar. No issue doing that, especially to be safe. And again, though, too, for me, with being a former driver, it's kind of like that thing, like, I used to be a former bartender. I always tip well when I go to a bar because I'm a former bartender. Likewise, I have no problem paying an extra fee in order to make it that drivers could have a minimum hourly guarantee. Now, would this make, especially bringing back to the first point of this video, the first initial cause, would this solve the issue of drivers not making enough money? I don't think it would fully solve it completely, because drivers might say, okay, yeah, I have a minimum hourly guarantee, but it's still not solving the issue of I need to be making more than just minimum wage. I think that would at least be a good start. I think at least be kind of moving, again, this is just my idea, and I may be wrong, right? I very easily could be wrong, but I wonder if this would actually help solve that issue. I wonder if it actually would help solve this issue of at least creating creating a little more protection for drivers. I think that's a big thing. Like I said in other videos, initially, I was always on the stance of drivers being employees. I'm like, they shouldn't be independent contractors. They should be employees. Yeah, I know the flexible schedule is useful, but I think Uber and Lyft could figure out how to make that work. Then I saw this gray area appearing, and I've said this before, I think in a prior video, that with Uber and Lyft, it's starting to create its own gray area that if you look at freelance jobs and independent contractor jobs and everything, there's always an exception just for ride sharing. It is the only true exception where if you look at like independent contractors versus employees, Uber and Lyft, without knowing it or not, is kind of creating its own middle category of being like an independent employee or something like that. Like you're not fully an employee, you're not fully an independent contractor. You're getting it. It's it's kind of like, and I said this before as like a funny analogy. You're kind of like an independent contractor with benefits, right? If like people are dating, they're not in a relationship, but they're not fully single. They're like friends with benefits, right? Or like, what is the word people are using now that Gen Z uses? I think situationship or something. Like it's kind of this new category. I look at that when it comes to Lyft and Uber, that a lot of drivers now in places like, let's say, California and New York are like independent contractors with benefits. Both, I guess, literally and figuratively, I guess, depending how you look at that, right? And I think that's huge. At least that way, and to me, and this is why I now move to the other side of the coin, where I think drivers now should stay as independent contractors because they're getting the benefits that employees do get. I think that helps satisfy, and it's a win-win for everybody, right? I think for Lyft and Uber, they clearly want their drivers to stay as independent contractors. But for drivers, they're like, hey, we want to stay as independent contractors as well, but we want the protections and employee-like protections. And that's been being satisfied by different legislation being put forward. Now, granted, in March of this year, in March of 2024 to timestamp it, there will be new stuff going on, for lack of a better word, with the Biden administration putting forward in place this new law and everything with are you an independent contractor or not, and how to classify it. We'll have to see what happens in real time when it comes to that. But again, this is my idea of what could solve it, because unfortunately, I think the money does have to come from somewhere. And yes, I know that a lot of people say, oh, well, and this is my theory too. I know a lot of people say, oh, well, David Reisher, the CEO of Lyft, he just wants way more money in his pocket. The company for Uber, the shareholders, they just want more money. And yes, that's true, but remember, there are a lot of operating costs. There's a lot of money that Uber and Lyft has to spend just to continue being Uber and Lyft. So although yes, I think there is some truth to the rich just want to get richer, I don't think that's the full truth. I think that there is an exact reason why Uber and Lyft is charging people, let's say, more for rides. In case you know, Uber and Lyft, both companies were doing bad for years. They were pretty much in the negative, and they kept having to like borrow money, do all this kind of stuff. Like they were not doing all this at all. Very, very similar. I think it's a very, very similar parallel to what's going on with Airbnb, where if everyone remembers, back in the day, Airbnb used to be amazing. Now, not as much. Now a lot of people are saying, hey, why get an Airbnb when I can just get a hotel way cheaper? I can cancel whenever I want. I don't have to put money down. I just pay when I get there. Like there's a lot of advantages to having a hotel over an Airbnb. Granted, I will say for me, I travel a lot and I do love long-term Airbnbs, like a month-long Airbnb. Still, luckily, I mean, the price has gone up for some places, but luckily still hasn't been too bad. Like I feel like long-term Airbnbs are still like amazing and I love them. I've done a bunch, whether it's in Denver or Vegas or Austin or whatever. Love long-term Airbnbs, but anyway, I should say that. But it's a very similar thing. Where back in the day, Airbnb was doing okay, kind of. They had great fees, and then especially post-pandemic, they're like, shoot, we need to start satisfying our shareholders who are saying, hey, when do we actually start making money? Because of all these things you're doing, there's not enough money coming in, and then boom. Same thing with Uber and Lyft, where they were not doing well, pretty much in the red, and then of course at some point they're like, okay, we can't continue this forever. We can't just keep coming out negative every time, or else we won't exist anymore. We have to do something. So I will say that for all the people saying and all the drivers saying, oh my God, Lyft and Uber, just they want to get their richer. They just want to. There is some truth to that. I mean, they probably do want to make money. Who doesn't want to make more money? But there is also other side of it that they do have to do what they got to do in terms of operating costs, variable expenses, fixed expenses, overhead, payroll, all this kind of stuff. So that's what I think. Again, bring this back home. I would propose, if I, let's say, had the option to, I wonder how it would work out. If, let's say, you just charge passengers $1 or $2 extra, like they're doing in New York, for delivery driving and rideshare driving. Although I will say I did not see a note when it comes to rideshare driving, but I'm assuming, I may be wrong, but I'm assuming, because if they're charging $2 extra for delivery, for each person, for every delivery, probably the same with rideshare driving, I think this would potentially make it work, honestly. Again, it's tough to say obviously what would happen. This is my speculation, just going off everything I've studied and researched. But then again, I don't have any insight to the true back end of Uber and Lyft. I think pretty much only Uber and Lyft really has the back end on their own. But just an idea. But for all my drivers out there, what do you think would solve this problem? Because I think at some point, I got to be honest, with all these videos I've done, and I've talked about the pros and the cons, I think there is going to be, and I may be wrong, but an inevitable breaking point where drivers say, okay, enough is enough. And maybe Uber and Lyft reaches a point where, like, you know what? We're not paying our drivers well. Enough is enough. I think there's going to have to be, at least in the future, because the tension's been building, I think, between a lot of drivers and Lyft and Uber. I know even, I've gotten some comments on the channel, too, of a lot of people saying, oh, there's going to be a strike where we're not going to drive. I think people were proposing, was it on Valentine's Day or something? I don't know. But there's a proposed date. I've seen this a few times, so I hate to say it, where drivers are like, oh, this date, we're not going to drive. And then people just drive, and then that keeps happening. So, you never know, though. What happened with the WGA and the writer strike here in Los Angeles, that was powerful and had real lasting change and impact. Could a driver strike happen? Potentially, right? So, but no matter what, though, I do see it, and I may be wrong, as a potential inevitability that there's going to have to be some change. With the tension building, with drivers being more frustrated, I think there has to be something put into place. So this is my idea of a small, well, per ride, small change that could have a big change over time.